Bolivia is divided in three regions according to our geography. We have the area, what I have already explained to you, the highlands, that represent 38% of the Bolivian territory, and this is surrounded by the Occidental Andes, as I told you, and parallel is running the Oriental Andes, as you see. Titicaca is in the middle of these two chains of mountains, and Titicaca has a river and 18 Popo Lake. Down we have Coipasa and Uyuni salt lakes, as you see. Once we cross the snow mountains, is the Bolivian forest and the valleys of Bolivia, as you realize. And over here we have the lowlands, which is the tropical region, the tropical area, and the northern part, northeast side of Bolivia, that is the Amazon basin, the jungle. Now, in this kind of geography, as you see clearly, we are in the south part of Titicaca Lake. That's the area, the location of Tiwanaco, that started to develop 1,500 years ago before Christ. Let's have a look of this picture, please. This is the most important picture because it's the chronology. This is our history, what happened in this region of the Andes, how it started the development of the Andean men here. So everything started more or less around before that. We know we have those two hypotheses. One of the hypotheses says that the men came by crossing the Bering Strait to settle this region. And then the other hypothesis is that the men arrived through Polynesia to settle South America. So those are the two hypotheses we have. The idea is that after this, we have here researchers that they said that around 15,000 years ago, before Christ, were the first men settled here, and those we call the pre-ceramic culture called Vizcachani. That's Vizcachani, the men who lived in caves that they had and were working with stones, having access on knives, making stones. That's this group that is called Vizcachani. These are going to be the first ones on this region of the highlands. So that after them, around 1,500 years ago before Christ, as you see, there are going to appear on the highlands of Bolivia three small villages. These are going to be the three first small villages. One of them is called Chiripa, that they were settled in the southeast of Titicaca Lake. The other one is Tiwanaco, that they were in the south part of Titicaca Lake. And the other one is Huancarani, that they were in the central highlands of Bolivia, are going to be the first towns. So, of course, in this time, in this period, the men already is working with agriculture. They are fishermen, they are making ceramics. That's the characteristic from before Christ about men of this time. So, however, each group, each town, besides these characteristics, they are going to have their own characteristic that makes the difference with the others. That's the case of Chiripa. The Chiripa that were in the southeast of Titicaca Lake are going to be the first men representing the man that made in stone. Those we call the monoliths. So are going to start to represent their main leaders that made in stone. And also the Chiripas are going to be the first ones in building underground temples. So it seems that by that time the men used to make some rituals for the water, and that's why they are going to be underground temples. In the case of Chiripa, Chiripa is quite near to Tiwanaco. 1 hour from here is the archaeological site of Chiripa. Then we have Tiwanaco, the place that we are visiting, this place. The Tiwanaco men of those times, of those years before Christ, are going to be men that they are going to pay more attention to the stars, to the constellations, so that they are going to realize that it was quite important in order to fix the weather, and this because of agriculture. So, in the case of Huancarani, the ones that were in the central highlands, where the highlands, this area of the highlands is a little bit drier than here. So the Huancarani people, it seems that are going to be the first ones in domesticate the llama. The archaeologists, they are going to find many heads of llamas made in stones in Huancarani towns. So, of course, you can imagine that before Christ, these highlands that you saw while we were coming from La Paz, it was completely different. There were more trees, there were more vegetation, more wild animals, pumas, foxes, condors, llamas, alpacas, vicuñas, guanacos, and so on. So, from these animals, these men are going to domesticate to the llama, and then is what they are going to make many copies of the llamas made in stones, and it's going to be called the town of the llamas, let's say, but at least by the archaeologists call it like that. Also, another thing that they used to do, these men in this center of highlands, is to build some platforms of soil, and on it they built their houses. It seems it was a way to avoid that couldn't be flooded in the rainy season of the areas where they lived by that time. So those were the first towns on the highlands in these regions and before Christ. As you realize, they developed parallel until the beginning of our era, when Jesus was born, more or less. So, and it's also around those years that something is going to change in Tiwanaco, that the men are going to be more prepared in Tiwanaco, because as they know how work the weather on the highlands, so they are going to create a technique of agriculture for the highlands where the weather is not so nice, especially for agriculture. So they will try to control the weather, creating this technique that later we'll see, and thanks to this technique they were able to get better production, and because of that the population started to grow. They had excelled in production, the population started to grow, they started to dominate more land, and so that they are going to dominate to the Chiripas and to the Huancaranis, thanks to the agriculture. And also by this time, they are going to be arriving to the Andes. So, they are going to be arriving to the Occidental Andes, and it's in the Andes that they are going to discover the metals. So, they are going to work with gold, silver, copper, and bronze. Bronze they will get from Peru, Bolivia, and Chile Andes. It's from there. And for what? For what? Because they will learn how to melt the metals, and with this they are going to get clamps, and the clamps were used to join the stones instead of cement. So that means that in this period that we call from 0 to 700 years ago after Christ, we call the urban period of Tiwanaco. So the best moment for Tiwanaco is in this period when they are building temples, and they are building two kinds of temples. Temples with 4 walls, big ones without roof, and inside of those temples, smaller temples, those that I told you, the Sun Temple, the Moon Temple. So that's when they are building these temples of the stones, when agriculture is growing, and it's the time when they are fixing at the same time their society, which was organized by the main leader who lived here, the local leaders, the priests, the warriors, and then the town. And the town, it was also divided according to the skills, fishermen, people with agriculture, engineers, architects, and so on. And so, that's more or less the idea of what was happening in the urban period of Tiwanaco, the domination of agriculture. They are creating another techniques. If you are by Titicaca Lake or that area, you will find pre-Columbian terraces. So they were people that they were more thinking in dominating the lands for agriculture. That's why they are going to create this new technique that is the terraces. The terraces are basically created to stop the erosion of the lands and to have again a better production. So they show us clearly that astronomy, that agriculture were quite important pillars for the development of this society called Tiwanaco. And After 700 years ago, they are going to get in another period. This period we are going to call the expansive period of Tiwanaco. It's when Tiwanaco is going to cross the Occidental Andes and they are going to arrive to the coast. They are going to cross the Oriental Andes and they are going to dominate the valleys, the forests, until part of the tropical region, as you can see, at least inside of Bolivia. And outside they will be arriving in northern part of Chile and Argentina, south part of Peru till the capital of Peru, Lima. So all those lands are going to be dominating, but not because of lands, it's because of the agriculture in the different ecosystems. That's the mentality, more or less. And those lands were divided in 4 regions, and the capital was this place, Tiwanaco, Titicaca Lake, the center. So it's in that way that started the history over here, and so it's also in the moment when they are going to build the last expression of them that are going to be pyramids like Acapana and Pumapunku pyramids are going to be the last buildings that they are going to leave in honor of the astronomy, because they are going to make some ceremonies, rituals for the sky, for the constellations. And so, however, they have to face around 900 years ago after Christ, the Tiwanacotas, they will have to face the weather because they are going to have problems with the rain, droughts, no rains in this year, in this area of Tiwanaco, and it seems it's going to affect to the main pillar, that is agriculture. And this as a consequence in a political, social, and economical way. And this is going to last from 900 till 1,200 years ago after Christ, and in fact it's going to be the end then of Tiwanaco. 1,200 years ago after Christ is going to end this civilization called Tiwanaco. Like a social organization is going to die, but not like people, because